Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects today, which is Qigong. Today, our guest is Master Mingtong Gu, who is the author of Wisdom Healing Qigong. And you can find out more about Master Mingtong Gu and his wonderful work at qicenter.com and ancienthealingsecrets.com. Welcome, Master Mingtong Gu.
Thank you, Catherine. So wonderful to be here with you, with all the audience.
Now, I've taught yoga now for about 25 years, but many people don't know that I've also taught Qigong for about 20 years. For our audience, Master Mingtong Gu, what exactly is Qigong?
Right, so yeah, yoga not being around for a while in the West, being pretty much accepted in the mainstream. And Qigong, I would say, still best keep a secret, still secret for most mainstream. And on one hand, Qigong has as long history as yoga, which is from yoga from India and Qigong from China. They're kind of parallel to each other, has its own flavor, but really sharing a lot of common theme, common cosmology, common view, and also has different language. So that's kind of appears as if they're quite different, but actually that's quite the same. So Qigong in general, as I said, has a long history, ancient history, but it has been kept more secretive in China and until 60 years ago. So what's familiar right now is like Tai Chi martial art because it's more visual and people see a lot of story, martial art stories, so on, so become quite famous. But Qigong is the internal art, it's internal. So it's very difficult to demonstrate externally, see externally. And for that reason, it's not so, well known. But in general, Qigong, the original idea of Qigong is really search for human potential. What is the human potential? And searching for secret for longevity. And then as a discovery is also, how can we live healthy, live in sustainable way. Then relatively new, using Qigong for healing chronic incurable condition, which is a new phenomenon in the human history, so to speak. So Qi basically means energy. Gong means practice, cultivation, also the benefit by working with energy. So I'll define, in general speaking, we are living with energy. Everything is based on energy. This body is made of energy, living on energy. And our emotion, even mental experience, is also animated by energy. So we're all living with energy, but the difference is most of us are not conscious of working with energy. Even we may talk about energy nowadays. So Qigong is really an ancient wisdom, allow us to consciously connecting with energy, cultivating energy, and expanding our capacity, using energy for health, using energy for other benefit of life in general. So that's the difference. You're consciously working with energy, and others is you're not conscious of it.
Right. Now, one of my 10 books is called Unlimited Energy Now. And one of the most common complaints that I hear from my new clients is that they're exhausted. People are
Right.
stressed, they're tired. And so that's why I wrote my book, Unlimited Energy Now, which goes over everything that you can do physically, energetically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually to rebuild your chi. But one of the things I'm always encouraging people to do is to practice Qigong. And I teach yoga 5 times a week. I teach Qigong once a week. If you go to my website, unlimitedenergynow.com, and you go to fitness and scroll down, I've got countless, or not countless, but a lot of free Qigong videos. So you can learn Qigong for free by watching the videos at unlimitedenergynow.com. So I feel it's very, very important. And as Master Mingtong Gu talks about, it's an internal art. It's physical exercise, just like yoga is physical exercise. So there are physical exercises that you can do when you practice Qigong. But pretty much anyone can practice Qigong. And I know that when I learned it, I learned it from a Chinese gentleman who came to Atlanta, and his teacher was a woman who was over 100 years old. Now, Master Mingtong Gu, you have been named Qigong Master of the Year by the 13th World Congress on Qigong and Traditional Chinese Medicine. How did you learn Qigong yourself?
Yes, first of all, like your title of the book, Unlimited Energy, that's one of the secret. We're going to talk more, how Qigong help you to access unlimited energy. And so a lot of limitation we're experiencing is based on limited perception, which is physically based. When you look at everything physical is limited, but there's energy beyond physical, beyond the physical separation limitation. So we're learning to tap into. And so my journey, discovering Qigong is really a surprise, one of a surprise in my life. As I often say, the most impactful events in our life is very much a surprise, very much beyond what we can plan. One thing leads to another. But what we're learning here is really learn to show up fully. Learn, often we say, follow your heart, follow your heart. What make you happy, what make you really sing, make your heart sing. So in my case, the effect on my journey is also true. Is searching for happiness leads me to discover Qigong. Even as the synchronicity of events in my life, I didn't discover Qigong until I lived in the US about 10 years, actually more than 10 years already. When I was in graduate school, studying fine arts in Ohio State, I discovered wisdom healing Qigong through a friend who was teaching Tai Chi in this form of Qigong in Ohio. So she gave me a book in Chinese and asked me to help her to translate. So I became very fascinated and realizing it's not only from China, but it's really philosophical orientation, has its own cosmology of working with energy. And so I was intellectually very stimulated as a fine art, as an artist. But I didn't know how to realize this concept, experience this concept. So I tried it and took some lesson with her, then discovered her teacher. Then I went to China to study with the founder of this form of Qigong, wisdom healing Qigong in China called Zinen Qigong. And my teacher had it is the biggest medicines Qigong hospital in China with 5,000 people practice together, not only occasionally, 1 month at a time. So, and he's also a doctor, both in Western medicine as well Chinese medicine, but he decided to use Qigong only as a way of healing, especially for chronic or incurable condition. So what is the name, labeled as chronical? That means incurable from conventional point of view, even from integrated medicine point of view. So in order to change beyond what have been identified as possible or impossible, you have to use a new method. In this case, is the ancient method of Qigong. So really, for most people thinking, how that be possible? But if you understand, Qigong allow you to tap into the power of the mind, the power of energy, then you're realizing, oh, not only everything is possible, but it's up to you how to make that happen for you. Because it does not really depend on something else, like medication. Does not depend on someone else, like a doctor or even, attentive, therapist, because you're really cultivating your inner power of your mind, your heart, your body, then suddenly become possible. So, but for me, I didn't think that was possible neither. When I started, I was doing it more for intellectual, spiritual reason. And, but as a surprise, took me 2 and 3 years heal my chronic condition, including asthma, sclerosis condition. I was doing it not for that purpose, but as an outcome, it just happened. And so then, and realizing, this is not just for spiritual development, not just for, experiencing life in a different way, which is so important. The main gift is really brought me happiness, brought me deeper awakening, deeper understanding of who I am, living from that place. So, but as outcome of healing of these condition, physical condition, allow me to really tap into more energy, more health. So I really enjoy this process, both spiritual on one hand, on the other hand, is very practical for health, for everyday living.
Right. Now, as a medical intuitive healer, when I do my medical intuitive readings, literally the first thing that I look at is a person's overall life energy.
Right.
And he's Master Mingtong Gu is nodding his head. So let's talk about why your personal chi is so important. So as I like to joke with my clients, if you have $1 million in the bank and you make a mistake, it's like, oh, well, bad on you. But if you have $100 in the bank or $10 in the bank and you make a mistake, you're really in trouble. And what has happened in our culture is that people are, as Wordsworth says, everybody's so busy, spending and getting, that they are not cultivating your own personal chi. I learned Qigong when I had adrenal burnout myself. And I started practicing regularly. And all my clients who are exhausted, I say, start practicing Qigong. If you do 20 minutes a day, you can totally rebuild your personal chi. And when your personal chi is high, you're happy, like Master Mingtong talks about. So it's a natural healing for your mind, overcoming anxiety, depression, and you have a stronger immune system. You're less likely to get the illnesses that go down the pike. And then if you do get well, then you're more likely to recover. So I know right now we're all practicing everything we do online. And my 83-year-old mother comes to the classes now. So this is a kind of practice that you can do when you age. I'm now 61. May I ask how old you are, Master Gu?
I'm 57, but feels young.
It feels young. So how you feel on the inside is very important. Now, just like there are different kinds of yoga, there's also different kinds of Qigong. So what is wisdom healing Qigong?
Yeah, good question. So, as I mentioned, Qigong has a long history, but because of long history, there's many lineages, many schools, So, but often we are familiar with the martial art, Tai Chi, and the acupuncture, Chinese traditional medicine, yin yang, Bagua, and so on. But it's not well known is underneath all that is the more kind of esoteric internal energy practice. And that is, you can call the whole thing as a Qigong, basically, yeah. Then martial art, like using Qi more for power, yeah. Then some Qigong using, Qi for spiritual development. Some Qigong using Qi for, superpowers in whatever, ways, yeah. So some Qigong used for healing. So in this case, depends on how you're using the energy. Energy is a source of life, source of whatever capacity, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual capacity. So wisdom in this case, in this form of Qigong is, again, as my teacher, Dr. Pan, he learned, from many different teachers, actually, 19 different masters, grandmasters from different schools and lineages. And he put this system together with the intention, on one hand, is traced back to the ancient source. But on the other hand, is putting the best he learned into one system, so make it more accessible and same time more complete. And also he has a way of kind of organizing this knowledge and wisdom, because he's a doctor, but also he's a scientist, and he's also really alchemist, as well as very experienced in all these lineages, in Buddhist tradition, Taoist tradition, martial art, and Chinese medicine, so on. So he was able to integrate what he learned into a system with a very powerful, complete cosmology and methodology and the method, combined different method. So accessing really the power of who we are. So the wisdom is really about accessing the energy of oneness, the energy of whole spectrum of existence, and the energy, the source of health, happiness, and our spiritual development. So that is the wisdom we're cultivating. Then healing is a benefit, is outcome. But once you get into the energy practice, you're really realizing healing is not just fixing physical problem. It's really allow you as a human being function in the most optimal level, not only just optimal level, but continuously improving your function. So it's a process of awakening and your capacity, including, improvement of your health right now, if you have any chronic or any kind of diagnosed problems. But if you don't have a diagnosed problem, you can always improve in your function. There's always space for improvement, but also deeply is about awakening the hidden potential. The hidden potential beyond what you know about yourself, beyond, intergenerational genetic function, beyond, what do we define, health right now. So that is the ongoing process. It's really healing, awakening is inseparable. So that's the byproduct. So often I say, this practice is equally beneficial for healing of chronic illness, but also for prevention as well, enhance your health condition no matter what is your age. But also it's the same practice for you to realize your longevity, and also the same practice for you to realize your spiritual capacity. So that's the beauty of this, like the best place you can invest. As you mentioned, your mother of 80 some years old, she still can enjoy this practice for all these different reasons.
Absolutely. And she really enjoys it, and it feels good. So it's very interesting because she works twice a week with a fitness trainer, and yet she comes to my Qigong class online. She said, I feel like I get my heart rate up higher practicing Qigong than I do working with my trainer, and yet it feels good. Nothing hurts. It's just this graceful movement.
Right.
Now, Master Mingtong Gu, what are our tiens? So in yoga, we talk about the 7 major chakras. In Qigong, we talk about tiens. What are tiens?
Right. So, yeah, different system we're using, different kind of energetic structure or genetic and energetic matrix. Sometimes energy body, energy center, meridian channels, a way to structure or perceiving, connecting, activating energy. So different system has slightly different approaches. But in general, there's a parallel in yoga, 5 chakra, 7 chakra, even you go into the 9 chakra. Similarly, Qigong, we call energy center. So tian is one of the main energy center in the body. There's 3 way of understanding. One is traditionally, it's called Qigong. Qigong. That means the Qigong where you're cultivating the immortal fires. Or another common language is called immortal baby. You rebirth yourself. So that's where the prenatal energy, postnatal energy uniting together. Another analogy is the fire and the water is cooking together, become uniting, producing the third element. So that is called Qigong. It's the same language, from more kind of language of alchemy, you're cultivating using other elements to produce gold. And so, but internally, energetically, and that deeply means your postnatal energy and prenatal energy uniting in the Qigong, then something else coming up is much bigger, much greater. So it's a rebirth process. So traditionally, you bring the Jing energy, the low tian. That's very similar to yoga. To the Kundalini in the yoga tradition. So bring this energy up to the Qigong, then you bring the heavenly energy downward to the Qigong, allow them to connect, integrate, eventually unite. So that is one powerful tradition. And so we just call this as tian. In the wisdom healing Qigong, in the navel level, we just call it a tian. Then the second way of understanding the importance of tian is the center of the physical energy body. The physical energy body, relatively can be experienced more directly about 3 feet around your skin. And of course, it's internal, but also is around you. So that means if anybody within 3 feet, even without touching them, looking at them, you can feel you can feel someone is in your energy space. So it's very somatic. Yeah. And that energy body is also mainly responsible for your physical health. So that is the tian is the center of that energy body. And so that's the second way of understanding. So that means if you strengthen that tian, you naturally strengthen that physical energy body, become more holistic, more integrated, more balanced, so improving your health very effectively. Then the third way of understanding is that center is also the center of the entire energy body, encompassing physical, encompassing emotional, as well mental, spiritual. So that's the whole energy body. On one hand, is in the subtle level of that energy body, including your mind, has no boundary. But on the other hand, is centered around the tian. And that's how Qigong cultivating that. So, for example, the center of your conscious energy body is in front of pineal, is inside of the center of the brain. And then the center of the emotional body is some tradition use heart. We're using suddenly forgot the terminology.
Middle tian. Yeah.
Yeah, in Chinese call it the middle dantian, but in the yoga there's another terminology. Suddenly,
Anhata, 4th chakra. Yes.
yeah, another English language. Anyway,
Yeah.
back to me. But so different system using a different center for kind of different energy bodies, so to speak. And so in this case, the three energy body, physical energy body, emotional energy body, mental energy body, and they're inseparable. Inseparable. So formulating one energy body together. And so that is you can use other center to cultivate in that one energy body. Then the result can be different. So in Qigong, we cultivating the tiens. So the philosophical orientation behind that is really we think of human being realizing full potential by realizing both, as a physical being as well, subtle, conscious energy being. So the union of heaven and earth, that's the philosophical orientation. So that is different from just transcending the physical, descending to the spiritual, to the, ascending to the spiritual. And our, say, oh, we're just physical beings, So it's more about integration. So the tiens is a place for that integration, for that union. So that's a three-way of approaching the tiens.
Right. Now, for our audience, I'm going to explain my understanding, such as is, as the way energy flows through your body. And energy is inevitable in that, and by that I mean indescribable. And when you have it, and because when you're too tired to get out of bed, or you're depressed or sad or unmotivated, then your chi is low. And when you're sick, your chi is low. We've all experienced that when you have had a cold and you feel, everything's just really slowed down. Or if you go to a hospital or a nursing home is a great example of that. The energy is just really slowed down. So a lot of times people will go, well, how can Qigong heal me? Or how can yoga heal me? Well, there's a vertical electrical current in the body. In yoga, they call that your hara line, but it basically goes from the heaven all the way through you down into the earth. So the hara, this vertical current, feeds your chakras or feeds your tiens, and these major energy centers in the body, the chakras and the tiens, feed your acupuncture meridians. Your acupuncture meridians feed your organs, and the organs feed energy into the muscles. So let's say you have a pain in your muscle. Well, somehow or another, there are going to be deficient qi in a corresponding area. And as Master Mingtong Gu talked about, by cultivating your qi and building your personal energy, you can heal literally almost anything. So anybody who's got adrenal burnout should be practicing Qigong, and that's pretty much everybody in Western society, right? And people with chronic illnesses, such as cancer. Now, Master Mingtong Gu, you mentioned that the world's largest medicineless hospital is in China. And I've seen a video of doctors in China emitting qi into a patient and literally dissolving a bladder tumor. There was a monitor and you could see that. So how can Qigong, I talked about the way that energy flows through the body, but how can ordinary people use Qigong for healing?
Yeah, I mean, the methodology is so simple, you know. So, as you said, most of us right now, whatever challenge we experience, health crisis, diagnosed or whatnot, stress and emotional anxiety and so on. And so in general, the main complaint is I don't have enough energy, with the feeling of depletion of energy. So two things you can discover slow Qigong practice. One is there's the infinite energy of the universe is equally available for everyone, no matter how old you are, how sick you are, how healthy you are, whether you're Chinese or, different skin, doesn't matter where you're living, it's all that energy is available for everyone. But unfortunately, most of us are not aware of it. Most of us have not been trained to work with energy. We're not grown up this way. So that's the reason, we kind of feel, okay, depletion of energy based on our perception, thinking, okay, I'm only have that much of energy in my bank, so to speak, like your analogy of bank. Yeah. So the Qigong is really learn, on one hand, is tap into this big bank, the universal energy bank. It's unlimited. So give you one example is, when you go to the nature, just go to the nature, walk around the nature, hugging the tree and so on, you just feel better. And what you're receiving is the energy from the nature directly. You're not eating the food. You're not owning anything. You don't need to own anything. You just experience it. Open your body, open your heart, open your mind, interacting with the energy. You feel nourished. You feel recharged. So that's a good example how Qigong can help us open into the subtle energy beyond any kind of limited perception or identification or even ownership. You don't have to own that energy. You can be nourished by this infinite source energy. So that is the first secret. But you have to learn to open. If your energy body is not open, then, if you're hiding yourself this way, contract yourself, then the energy cannot walk in through you neither. So the second piece is really also, when we're complaining, I don't have enough energy, you discover the deep truth is energy you're born with is inside of you. The energy you're born with as you experience as a child, if you look around the child, right, the children, as if they have unlimited energy, they're running around day and night, the experiment done, you compare with Olympic championship with a kid, average kid, do same activity in the same room, after a couple hours, the athletics, exhausted. The kids have unlimited energy. You're thinking, oh, the kids have unlimited energy. The truth is, the kids' energy system is open, is flowing, not because the kids have more quantity of energy than athletics, actually. Their energy, if you measure quantity, is less than grown up, but their quality is different, their structure is different, the way of connecting with the energy is different. The energy is flowing. That's why they're automatically energized. No matter what activity they engage in, they continue to be energized. And of course, to a certain degree, when they get tired, they fall asleep. The next day, they perfectly have more energy again. So it's like that. It's different way. So the truth is, we have that same level of energy you're born with. We call prenatal energy still inside of you, and then you're receiving the postnatal energy. Is the food, is all the energy you're receiving, in life, basically. One category is more physical energy we take into the physical body. Another level of energy is including the emotional energies. There's a lot of energy exchanges in all relationships. We know how that is energizing, how that is nourishing. And lack of that, you feel depleted, you feel, lost, you feel stuck. And so all this energetic process is happening in life, but what happened is over the time of growing up, our energy start to contract. So the main cause of contraction is stress of life. So anytime when you're experiencing some stressful, that means something more challenging than comfortable or more difficult than you can handle, then what happens is your mind contract, your heart contract, your whole body contract, your whole energy system contract. So that's happening is like 24/7. Anytime you experience something you label as bad, your energy system contract. Anytime you think of something you dislike, your energy system contract. So That is part of life. But the point is, if you contract for only 5 seconds, you're fine. If you can open again, you're fine. If you contract for 5 hours, maybe relatively that's still okay. But if you contract for 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 decades, then you can imagine the same energy in the contraction, the whole function is compromised, is numbed. You're heading, that energy is heading towards death, opposite of life, opposite of function of life. So that's where, the key is. Qigong is allow you to be aware. You cannot avoid in contraction. You cannot avoid stress of life. You cannot avoid the challenge of life. For example, right now experiencing so much, 10 times more than usual. But how, the body carry the contraction. If you can open from contraction, then you're fine. But if you carry that contraction, even not wearing it, even if you're not aware of it, the body carries this chronic contraction in your body, then eventually the body falling apart. Eventually, illness comes. Whether it's immune system, cardiovascular system, hormone system, whether it's digestive system, reproductive system, it doesn't matter what, the symptom might be. But internally starting with this energy contraction. So on one hand, we're experiencing so much energy contraction. The worst thing is we're not aware of it. That's the number one problem. We're not aware of it. If you're not aware of it, then you don't know how to work with it. You don't know how to improve it. So the second thing is, once you learn to be aware of your body, aware of the contraction, then you're experiencing, all the problems you have in your life, basically, all your history. The pain, the discomfort, the tension, the tightness, the emotional anxiety. Oh my God, so much happening in the body. So our tendency is avoid it, fight it, suppress it, running away from it. It doesn't feel good. So you kind of distracting yourself again. Okay, I'm going to watch a movie, more comfortable. I don't want to deal with my chronic pain. If I lie down on the couch, watching the movie, as if the pain is not there anymore, but you're not making any positive difference. Yeah, same way if you're using a painkiller, it's masking that pain. And you're thinking, oh, okay, I'm more functional now, which is true, temporary benefit, but not really resolving the deeper pain, resolving the deeper cause of the pain. So Qigong allows you to say, okay, now I want to do something beyond just ignoring, beyond just depends on medication. So when you go deeper to your body, learn to perceiving the energy beyond the pain, beyond the discomfort, beyond the contraction, then realizing the power is still there. The power as a human being is still there. The creative power is the power of regeneration. The energy, circulating inside of your body, inside of your organ, inside of your cell. And that deeper energetic communication, which is so essential. We're talking about brain communication with the rest of the body. How it's communicating. Yeah, slow neurotransmitter, but that is a form of energy. But beyond neurotransmitter, there's more subtle energy. Yeah, your mind is communicating also with your body. Your emotion, subconscious mental activity is also communicating. It's also the whole energy system. So if the energy is blocked, then the communication is interrupted. Right. Then you're experiencing, separation, imbalance, and fragmentation, so on. So the energy flow allow you restoring the energetic, not just balance, but the energetic communication. Right. So then the function naturally become, better. So that is easy to understand, but you have to experience that. Just intellectually thinking, oh, that seems like so different than, the normal way of doing things.
Right. Now, as a medical intuitive healer, I talk about how there's really only 4 problems ever. And the 4 problems are blocks, congestion, resistance, or interference. So for example, one day there was a hurricane and a tree fell down and blocked a road, right? Right? Congestion is like clutter in your house or blocked arteries. Resistance is unwillingness, right? So there's so many natural healing remedies available. That's why we have the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. There's all this wonderful information that you can do for free, like Qigong. But are you willing? And in one of my books, What is Healing, I talk about there's 25 different payoffs for staying sick and unwell. And finally, there's interference. So interference is something from the outside, like a hurricane or the government, right? Or COVID-19, right? That's changing everything. But I think what Master Gu was saying was so profound, because the real problem is when you get congested. As I'm always saying to my clients, the word emotion is supposed to be energy in motion. And, you know, we all have negative things that happen to us that we're not too happy about. And you feel your feelings, but you want to move through those feelings. And Qigong is just a beautiful way of getting your energy moving so that you can release. And sometimes I feel like you don't even know what it is that you're releasing. So Master Gu, how do you feel that that Qigong can release our negative emotions, such as anxiety and depression, and help us to arrive at a deeper sense of inner peace?
Yeah, so once we understand, all the issue, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual issue we're facing is the expression of energetic contraction in your system. Once we understand that, then you can, very consciously, purposely making the positive change by doing the movement. For example, the movement, the physical movement, especially you want to open in these three key areas. The shoulder area carries so much stress, so much congestion. And then another is the hip areas, a lot of stress, a lot of, stagnation, especially a lot of emotional stress. And also the spine. The entire spine is connecting with the brain, with the rest of the body, and also carry a lot of stress, congestion, so on. So use these simple movement, focus on opening these three places, and then you can go deeper into the entire meridian channels. You go deeper into your 5-organ system. So in this case, we use the sound, 5-organ sound, allow you to tap into the energy of the organ. And not only the physical energy, but also the emotional energy. So when we're experiencing fear, that's the expression of energy contraction in your kidney system. So then you do certain movement, opening that energy, do certain sound, like opening the energy, then the energy opens up again. Suddenly you emotionally feel different. So the transformation of emotion become possible. So on one hand, this emotion is natural in human experience. It's including fear. If we don't have a fearful, emotional experience, probably humanity will not survive that far to here, to this point. But if you're stuck in the fear, then become a big problem. If you are reacting life from the fearful place most of the time, then you have big problems. So having the capacity to experience fear is good. It's natural. So when true crisis happen, you can protect yourself. Yeah. So that is internal protection. But if you're stuck in the fear, or you are, experiencing the fear when you're not in the crisis, then become unnecessary suffering, become a big problem. So that's these practice allow you opening the same energy, which can cause fear or experiencing the fearful pattern from the past. For example, from trauma, you're experiencing the fear, then you carry that fearful pattern with you in the safe time. Then, you become the victim of that history. So when you heal this trauma, it's about awakening the energy, awakening the same energy is contract by the fear. So when you're awakening, opening the energy, then you're releasing that fearful pattern. Same time, you are come back to your wholeness. So that is one powerful example. So the sound healing allow you to tap into the energy of your organ, particularly the emotional energy, is very difficult to tap into, either mentally or doing exercises. We have done a lot of these activity, including even meditation, including psychotherapy, including a lot of fitness exercises. But the link, the mind, body, the link with deeper energy dimensions, especially emotional energy, often we say, the issues in the tissue. You have to go deep inside, and no one can do the work for you. Any support can be beneficial temporary. You can feel emotional release, emotional. If you're looking at things, with guidance, with a new perspective, you feel a sense of peace. But the deep issue may still there. The energetic contraction may still be there. So that's where the proactive, self-active, self-connective, self-empowering process is the key for you to make a deeper change. So that's how it happens,
You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. Our guest today has been Master Mingtong Gu, author of Wisdom Healing Qigong. You can find out more about Master Gu and his wonderful work at qicenter.com and ancienthealingsecrets.com. And remember, when you take the time to cultivate your personal qi, you experience healing naturally because you exude vitality. And when you do get sick, it's easy to heal. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.